are these people?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I've got our friend GenXGirl. This is Indy, for those who are listening on the podcast. And I brought our friend GenXGirl1994 from Twitter. Say hi. Say hi.
Hi.
So we had such a good time talking about Betar and about all of her work on Twitter to expose all of the money and influence that's coming from Israel and Zionism to try to push the narrative in this country, and influence our lawmakers, influence media, influence wherever they can, especially on social media. And what we wanted to do was go a little deeper into some of the research that she's been doing. I had a few more questions about the process and what she did. I think that if you check out our previous conversation, you'll hear a lot about that and her background and how she got here. But what we wanted to focus on today, because we have a lot of material that we wanted to get to, was to get to Betar and then its connections with Mayor Eric Adams, with this incident that happened in Brooklyn where they were auctioning off Palestinian land within a temple to only Zionists, obviously, that were in there. And then there was a clash outside between anti-Zionists and Zionists, and they framed it on all over the news that it was Arabs versus Jews, but it was actually Jews versus Jews. So welcome, GenXGirl. You're doing great stuff, and I want to turn the floor over to you, and I'm gonna show the latest tweet, or one of the beginning tweet in the thread that you've been putting together to kind of lay all this out so people understand what we're talking about here. And I'm gonna let you talk, and I'll throw questions in here and there.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I started to look at this because I started to see some of the, some posts. So I think maybe now it's been like a few weeks now. Just when Betar was kind of, becoming more vocal, and there were other pieces to it, right? There were other people involved. There was this woman that works for Daily Wire, and she also reports for Front Page and some other places, and she was really vocal. And this was when they came out really hard on, about creating lists that they were going to send to ICE and the Trump administration. And they were pushing out, that they had some AI that they were using and all this kind of stuff. And this woman she's the one who really grabbed my attention first, because she started to post about it, and she was being cited in articles. So I looked her up, and I'm like, well, that's weird. She's a reporter. Why is the reporter so staunch? Just really behaving like an activist and not a reporter at all. So that it started there. And then as I started to get digging, I started finding a lot more connections. The first of which was the World Zionist Congress, which has an election coming up. And she was listed on there. Betar was listed on there. Betar's president, Ronn Torossian, was listed on there. And then, of course, Mort Klein from
Zionist Organization of America, right? ZOA?
Yes, ZOA. Thank you. From ZOA was listed on there. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. And so, I started to dig. And then, of course, started finding more pieces. And you have that picture that I put together of all the touch points and how they're connected. And I put them all under the umbrella of this World Zionist Congress, because these members that are underneath it are all part of the Zionist Organization of America's coalition that's running for office in the World Zionist Congress that's coming up for election this year in Israel. And so their entire group is literally, hardcore, right-wing, pro-Kahanist, JDL, you name it, of people that even the Israeli government itself and the U.S. government has labeled terrorist organizations. These people have links to them. So super hardcore. And then you see, underneath that, some members of Congress that are, tied to that, namely, you've got Claudia Tenney and Weber over there working with the Friends of Judea and Sumeria. And then, of course, they just, launched their own caucus that's called that. And they have introduced bills to rename West Bank that. So they're all working together. That team, that group, that's the Friends of Judea and Sumeria, is actually part of the Zionist, I keep forgetting, ZOA, whatever it is, Zionist Organization of America. They're part of their coalition. And so there's all these touch points, and the entire thing is insane because you don't even have to dig too many layers to find it. And so, you've got members of Congress working in conjunction with these organizations that are part of the ZOA coalition that is hardcore, right wing, beyond Likud, even, Likud's positions that are running for this Zionist Congress election, and they're taking a very, very hard stand and promoting, old terrorist organizations. And so that's how it started, and where I started to look into these guys. Then I started to, it's just so massive that I couldn't do just one thing, so I started to do them in separate threads, and I introduced, in my second post, I introduced Ronn Torossian and Betar, and all of the links that they have, because it's that one was quite interesting because that man is very, at least he used to be very connected. He's kind of persona non grata a bit nowadays, but connected to people like Richie Torres. He fundraised for him. He is his top donor currently. He fundraised and was very, very influential in Eric Adams' election in 2022, or whenever his election was. And then when you go beyond that, there's a whole other world of celebrities, politicians that this man's tied to, and he is very, very very happy to post pictures of himself with all of these people. So finding information about this man is incredibly easy. You guys should, try to Google his name. I mean, it's just, who's who. And he has a PR company, and that's where he met a lot of these people. And his, his specialty is really crisis management, right? So doing PR for people who are having, a moment of crisis. And so he's represented people like P. Diddy, Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo. Which one is the one that was on CNN? Is it Andrew Cuomo or
Chris?
brother?
Chris was on
Chris Cuomo.
CNN.
Yeah, Chris. So he represented Chris Cuomo when he got fired. P. Diddy, Pornhub during their crisis when they were getting sued for child pornography. And also 50 women who sued them. And so, he comes in and works with these people and spins. He's like a spin doctor. And so, but he had to, step down from his company because I think it was the Daily Beast that did a relentless expose on this man over and over, exposing him for, shady tactics. So he would set up he had set up a second company that he used to attack, any of his rivals, to attack competitors of his clients, and to also talk himself up as well as his clients up. Yeah.
It's all artificially inflated, and it's within a network, and they create their own narratives for themselves. And we see this in entertainment too. Okay, where the person that owns Billboard magazine also owns Rolling Stone magazine, also owns the charts, and then you see, and also has these other creators under contract. These two creators are having beef, and they're putting them out in Rolling Stone, and they're talking about them and putting them up in the Billboard charts, and it's all interconnected and very dirty.
Exactly. And And if, to the average person who's not looking into this stuff, it just looks like, oh, this person is really getting kudos from all of these, their competitors or
Right.
their, people in the same industry. But in fact, it's they themselves doing it to, as you said, inflate their position. So what happens is that, this also applies to how Israel propaganda is pushed out, because it's like a network of obscure, quote unquote publications that will push out a story that's completely bogus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they will keep pushing it and pushing it. And there's a lot of them. I mean, I'm talking, 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60 of them, and more, pushing out the same narrative. But it's like some website you've never heard of, but it has the word news on it, right? And then they'll do it for like at least like 24, 48 hours. And then you start seeing these mid-tier, or what I call in the pyramid in my head of mid-tier publications picking up that are very pro-Israel. So the Washington Free Beacon, the New York Post, places like that will pick it up, right?
Right.
And they'll start repeating it, the Allgemeiner, and they'll start repeating it for another like day or two. And what you find is after that second cycle is when mainstream media starts repeating it. And it happens every single time. And Torossian writes for a few of these publications that do that.
What a
As does
surprise.
as does that other woman that works for the Daily Wire. And so you see that there's a network of people. And I found out recently in the New York, Brooklyn, and the Boro Park incident that happened, the people that were out there, they're recording, are part of a Israel network. And I found this out through a completely unrelated story, but found out that it's completely related. There's these posts that were going around. It was exposing this network that's I don't know if you've heard of that account on X called Raw Alert.
Oh, sure.
They push out. Yeah, you've seen that, right?
Well
So there
known.
was a story going around that Raw Alert and this band of other accounts, and there's like a thing of screenshots, are in these group chats that coordinate stories and push them out. Yet, they're also there's like grooming and pedophilia and things like that insinuated, right? So I don't know how they got a hold of this, but they got screenshots of their group chats, and it really started to blow up. And at first, Raw Alert started to make threats about suing people, but then it quickly, like within 24, 48 hours, the whole story crumbled, and then all of his people started backing away from him because there was just so much out there. Well, when I looked at, the person that had exposed this shared it with me, and I looked at the list, I'm like, wait a minute, these are the same people that have been pushing out this Boro Park story that the Zionists were the victims. And it's incredible. So it's something that I have to look into some more.
That's
But they were,
interesting.
yeah, highly interesting. Like, what is going on?
Well,
And
it's
so
a
that,
media network is what you're talking about.
mm-hmm,
And to get back to to what you're talking about. So here's the incident. And these are your tweets from, and what date is this? February 18th, just last week, about a week ago.
yes,
We're recording this on Tuesday, the 25th. Okay. So this is Mario Awful, I call him. He's an op. He's one of the
yes,
people in this network, one of the leaders, one of the nodes, I would call them, in this network of disseminators of misinformation. There's another journalist by the name of Patrick Henningsen who has been doing a lot of work to expose some of these people as well. They often will put out accurate stories, but then will mix in sensationalized or stories of misinformation as well to
yes,
push out narratives. Adame Media is another one of these notorious accounts that does this. And in this case, he's pro-Palestinian protesters class with Jewish community. That's correct in how that's framed. There were other reports that were
but it's
framing this
interesting.
as Arabs. But go ahead.
Yes, and by doing that, and then having others call them Hamas, jihadists,
Yep.
Arabs. So one, you're conflating all Arabs with jihadists and all Arabs with Hamas. And then when you have people like Newfall saying pro-Israel, I mean sorry, pro-Palestinian, now you're conflating all four together, right? So they're all one and the same, and so people start using those words interchangeably when in fact they're completely unrelated, right? And so they started pushing this out, and that's what I started to pull some of the videos, and incredibly these people were posting videos that clearly showed in some cases, like in Newfall's case, that these were anti-Zionist Jews on one side and Zionist Jews on the other, which is the clip, if you scroll up,
Yep.
which is the clip I pulled from Newfall's clip, showing that it's Betar on one side, and then you have anti-Zionist Jews on the other side of the protests. But that narrative initially was just completely, like no one was looking at that or paying attention. They were just looking at whatever violence was going on and just going with it. So I started to pull these clips, and I'm like, wait, hold on, this is not what's happening, because I had been following this, like I said, 24 hours before, and I kept trying to raise the alarm, like, hey,
Yep.
these guys are going to incite violence, but it was falling on deaf ears until it actually happened, and then everyone started paying attention, like, whoa, what's going on? And so you see that was 24 hours before where they were calling for that, and so they go there, they incite this violence, they commit the violence, and then they have their network of quote unquote news and whatever,
Right. Media agents.
posting clips, and then the narrative that goes with those clips is that the jihadis were attacking the synagogues and we were defending them, and then they started beating us up. Well, in fact, nobody was attacking the synagogue. There was a protest happening in front of the synagogue, and they were spinning the story as, they're doing that because they're anti-Semites and they hate Jews. No, there was an actual sale going on inside of that synagogue, of Palestinian
Palestinian
property.
land. That's right.
Yeah, and they had they
Here,
had
that's
scheduled
this.
this event. Yep. And if you notice, like in Betar's post right there, the information it clearly says it's to protest the Palestinian land. But what he does is he posts the same flyer, but calls it jihadis are attacking synagogues, and we're going to, and then tells people to bring their dogs and wear their helmets, and we're going to get, is literally inciting violence, and then that's what ends up happening. And what it turns out is it's literally a handful of people on their side causing all of this violence, and then they're using the clips to make the other side look like they're the violent people. So, but thankfully, it started to, people started to pick up on that. One of the interesting clips that they themselves and one of their network people posted was Betar and one of their members, standing there and waving the Kahan high flag.
That
The
yellow
Hanhai is,
flag. Yep, right here.
yeah, they
That's
are
a terrorist organization.
Yep, they're a terrorist organization. And I had posted when I did Ron Torossian's post, I had posted in there that he is in all of the behavior that Betar is displaying today and the things that they're invoking. They, he appears to be wanting to revive the spirit of, Kahan High, JDL, Ergon, all of these organizations that they had affiliation with at some point. They're trying to bring that back. Well, my post gets they mass reported that post, and it gets hit with inciting or
Hate
no
speech and
hateful conduct.
violence, right.
Yeah, hateful conduct. But in fact, ADL just put these guys on their list. Yep, ADL put these guys on their list, and guess what ADL did? In their explanation, they say exactly that they are a hate group because they're trying to revive this behavior of these organizations. Well, I had noticed it as well because I've been tracking these guys for like 4 weeks now, and I know, and researching and about all of these other organizations like Kahan and all this stuff, and they're doing exactly what these guys used to do in the 80s here in the U.S. And then going even as far back, through the decades in Israel and Palestine. So anyhow, that's what was happening. This whole thing was staged, and then people were there to record it and then try to put out a narrative. And what's alarming, though, is the amount of elected officials that jumped on board very quickly to embrace this narrative. Dan Goldman, who is, a member of the House of Representatives in Congress, was repeating that same story about, pro-Hamas people wanting to attack synagogues a whole 24 hours before the event even happened. Again, posting the flyer that clearly says what it was about, but saying that that it
but
was
wait a minute, anti-Semitic violence. Jews on Jews is anti-Semitic violence now?
Yeah, according to him, because again, they want everybody to believe that the people there were Arabs, when most of the people there were anti-Zionist Jews. In fact, when I was concerned the day, hours leading into the protest, I was growing really concerned. I was like, oh my God, there's going to be violence. And I started to reach out to some folks and started asking, who the people were, if they that were organizing this. And the feedback I got was, don't worry, majority of the people that are organizing this are anti-Zionist Jews. They're not Arabs. So they, the chances of them getting violent with them are slim, So that kind of gave me a little bit like, okay, this is not going to be a good look for them if they start attacking, considering what happened with Finkelstein and all this kind of stuff. But
well,
in fact,
I want
it didn't
to
matter.
back up. Finkelstein. Let's mention that for a second, because I covered it on How Do We Miss That, but we did not really show what they did here. I've got it right here in this thread. Okay, but this is crazy. Wait. So they walk up to him.
How's it going? I got you a pager. You want a pager, Norman? Jews were known for being smart.
And then they put that damn thing in his pocket.
Pager, Norman. It's fucking Holocaust denier, you piece of shit.
That's it. It's insane on so many levels. Calling him a Holocaust denier is insane.
It's insane.
They're Holocaust deniers. Literally right now, they're denying a Holocaust openly and actively right now. But the projection is off the charts. So they did this. Go ahead.
They did this, and then they followed Finkelstein all the way to
Milwaukee, right?
Milwaukee, I think. Yeah. Where this guy is, because he was supposed to give, he was invited to give a speech. And this guy decides to, go there. Now, again, leading up to this event, Betar was posting online how they were going to have, and they had these pictures of this guy that, you're a stereotypical terrorist, right? So the ski mask and looking scary or whatever. And they were calling him Boris, and that Boris was going to go and get him and all this kind of stuff. Well, they do that, right? And then this guy shows up. Well, apparently this guy, the guy who had organized the event, has a restraining order against this guy. And it's like a whole thing of, he had put a mural on the side of his business, and that basically said, I think the message was, imagine becoming the thing that you hate, right? And it was picture of Nazi Germany, and then on the bottom half, it kind of like melded into what's going on in Palestine, right? So comparing the two as one and the same. And the sign said, imagine becoming what you hated. Well, these people got really upset over it. So he and his 70, 80-year-old father showed up with axes in the middle of the night and started going to town on this sign. And then, there's cameras there. They got caught. They got arrested. And then that guy, put a restraining order against them, right? So he can't come within whatever. So this guy is all morning fighting it. Batar's online accusing the police of anti-Semitism. I mean, it was just like a crazy, insane, campaign. And it turned out the guy showed up anyway, and then ended up getting arrested like a fool, and then couldn't do anything, at the event. So then they sent some other guy who, basically they were trying to talk it up like he was going to go in there and tell Finkelstein off. But all he ended up doing is making one comment and then got all embarrassed because everybody just started staring at him like, what are you doing, weirdo? And then he just shut up and walked away. So it was just like a complete idiotic mess, and it was just, it looked like a complete PR stunt to try to get more attention, And I was reading when I was doing my research on Torossian, that Torossian aligns very much with the ideology that, similar to Trump's, that no press is bad press. So when you see these kind of like stunts that they pull where everyone's just like, oh my God, what are they doing? When you align it with how Torossian used to do PR and how he believes, you should use PR, it aligns with that methodology very well. Because again, no bad press is not, is still good press. Like any press is good press. Bring attention to yourself. So these people just don't care what they're doing so long as they become the focal attention and they cause havoc, in any of these cases. But what's happening is a lot of the Zionists are not happy with them because it is really shedding a light on what I call as, their behavior, IDF's behavior in Palestine, in Gaza and West Bank. They've exported that here in the U.S. and we're getting firsthand, a visual of that sort of behavior.
Bullying,
here, and people are not happy with it.
Bullying, terrorism. Look, remember the skunk that was sprayed at the Columbia campus? That I believe was also Betar, if I remember correctly.
I believe you're right.
Okay, and that goes back to like last November or December. That was one of the first incidents I remember after there were protests on campus, and it was Shai Davidai knew somebody, and he was involved with fighting with somebody, and the next thing you know, there's some kind of an attack. I know he had a whole thing too. He's not doing so great these days from what we hear. We're all blocked by him.
There's infighting, there's the Zionist camps have started to fracture, due to Betar in large part. You're starting to see other organizations that are similar to Betar, like Shirian Collective. And then what's that guy, the actor, the bozo that's always on
Michael Rappaport.
Michael Rappaport, all of these guys now. If you go into Shirian Collective's X page, their banner now is the Kahan High banner. Rappaport, Betar put 2 clips of him praising Mir Kahan, and Kahanism. So it's exactly what I've observed and what, and I cannot believe I'm actually agreeing with Idiot on anything because I hate them. But they also documented that same thing that they're trying to revive this, and they're trying to kind of spread and disseminate this viewpoint and get other people on under the tent. Now, for most people, and myself included, I don't remember the terrorism of Kahan High, but in the U.S. they were very much a terrorist organization. They killed a bunch of Americans in the U.S., car bombings, things like that. And so they were put on this list for a reason. Now in 2022, they were taken off the list by Anthony Blinken's State Department,
right,
under the excuse that they're not active anymore. So therefore, we're going to take them off the list. In reality, the reason they took them off the list, which happened just a few months before Ben-Gvir became their interior minister, is because of Ben-Gvir. Because Ben-Gvir was a Kahanist and was actually arrested for being a Koch member. And so you can't have a minister of Israel that can't come to the U.S. and is part of your closest quote unquote allies government be a terrorist member that's on your terrorist list. So
I
they
can't imagine
declassified
why.
them. Yeah, right. So they take them off the list, but they left them on the strategic global terrorist list, which means that any active members of Kahan High, the U.S. Can still sanction them. They can, they can, what's the word? Like when they repossess your assets, they can take your assets and all this kind of stuff, and they can't travel here, right? And so they left them on that list. So these people are still on that list. And so, but yet you're seeing this, this sort of embracing of this. And that segment of the Zionist movement is now receiving backlash from, the ADLs and, the people who would much rather, have us have this image of the Zionist movement as a very peaceful, very peaceful, sophisticated, and movement that's looking to preserve the only democracy in the Middle East, rather than this savagery that these people are exposing to everyone.
While they drop 2,000-pound bombs on kids for 15
Yes.
months, right?
Exactly.
Civil.
Exactly.
Exactly. I want to get into the Eric Adams thing because we've touched on Torossian. There's a big relationship and a history between Eric Adams. In the wake of this Brooklyn incident, Eric Adams comes out and gaslights because his actual bosses are Israel, of course, just like every other politician in this country, it seems, at this point, that running a major city are responsible for anything that's especially involved that could involve Jews and not just Jews, but Zionists. Okay, Jews and non-Jews alike, and it's important to make that distinction over and over again because a lot of people are letting that line slip, and
yes,
and it's getting down a slippery slope because Pete Hegseth is a Christian Zionist, all right, and fundamentalist, and he's he's in the same boat as a lot of these Betar US. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call him a terrorist, although he's perfectly happy with Israel terrorizing Palestinian children. And he wouldn't really want to say so, but he kind of says so. So Eric Adams starts off by gaslighting and saying that anti-Semitism has no place in New York City, which it shouldn't, okay? Nor should anti-Palestinian behavior, but that seems to be okay. Nobody ever talks about, forget about the fact that Palestinians are the real Semites here because they actually live in the region and historically come from there, whereas most Israelis have a European background and they're not really Semitic, but that's a whole other story. We will not tolerate attacks on Jewish New Yorkers. And here we go with anti-Semitism, Judaism and anti-Semitism, okay, and Zionism, trying to conflate the two. All right. And you remind him, disgusting, corrupt dude, that Betar, which is run by your buddy, Ronn Torossian, right, and your donor, organized the attacks on people protesting that sale of stolen Palestinian land, the majority of whom are Jewish in Boro Park. So, like, again, framing this as anti-Semitic when when most of the people there were Jewish to begin with that were protesting it. And then you made this video. Now, I don't know if I can play this if it's got music to it. It's almost 9 minutes long, and there's a ton of material in there. And this kind of...
Yeah, so if you can actually mute it and then...
and just let it run.
I don't know if, are you able to make it bigger just so that...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, like...
There we go.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so so I'm writing an article, which is taking me forever to do, and I'm kind of like a little bit regretting even starting it because it's just so massive, and every time I think I've got everything, then something new pops up, and then I just go down another rabbit hole. But anyway, I'm hoping it'll finish sometime soon. But anyway, so I decided in the meantime to just make this video showing an outline of the connections between these people, and basically what happened was, okay, so when Eric Adams was indicted for bribery, corruption under FARA, right, as violations of FARA, because we have a USC code that that specifically says that if you are an elected, elected official, now this applies to the federal government, but New York has somewhat similar, that you cannot be bribed, you cannot take, money and gifts and whatever from foreign agent. It's contradictory to the role that you serve. And so, there's FARA violations, which says that, you have to, if you are working to represent a foreign government, you have to be registered as an agent. But there's also rules about how, as an elected official, you interact with, a registered agent, right? Which
Right.
takes you also, is also a glimpse into why pro-Israel lobby has fought so hard against being labeled foreign agents, because there's whole level of like reporting and disclosing that you have to do of what you've done, how much you've given to people, who you've interacted with, who you had dinner with, who you even had a meeting with, right? And
Sure.
so anyway, so when that happened, that came out and it just blew up, right? What people didn't realize is that there was the New York Times had published a series of articles talking about subpoenas that Eric Adams had been issued starting in the summer and then leading up to his indictment. And those subpoenas weren't just for Turkey. They were for 5 other countries as well. And it included Israel. And that caught my eye because I have done, a lot of research on this subject. And I know that, getting the FBI to actually look into an elected official under FARA related to Israel has not been done, right? It's been done in other countries and other related to other countries like Bob Menendez, in Egypt and Henry Kuehler and Azerbaijan and Mexico and things like that, but never Israel, which is always like, the giant elephant in the room that, is just overlooked. So when I saw this, I was like, whoa, ding, 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 this is something, right? And I started to look into it and I started to look at, what is it about this, right? And what I found was a whole world that opened up. And so I'll start it off by saying that, when the indictment came out, and it was September 26th when he was indicted, on the same day, Tablet Magazine, and if you just let this play a little bit and I'll tell you when to stop.
Sure.
I have a picture of Tablet Magazine's cover story. Tablet Magazine came up with a cover story. So those are the 5 countries, by the way, that he was also subpoenaed for. Okay, the clip is right here. Okay, if you could stop it right here. So Tablet Magazine published this on September 26th, same day, and it's titled, "The Jews Should Stand with Eric Adams." Now, it's a long article, but in that article, the argument that he makes all the way leading up to this section that I've highlighted is basically making an argument to, and he calls it Jewish to the Jewish community, but really he's targeting Zionists, right? Because Zionists are the ones who fund Israel lobbyists, right? And give money to the Israel lobby. And so what he says is, for here where the logic.
Oh, I lost you.
Like Turks and Queens or Zionist Jews who support AIPAC, the ADL, or B'nai B'rith, and then it goes on to the bottom. It says will be criminalized.
Right.
So the entire article, and Tablet Magazine, I found out, is a Zionist, publication that, and their target audience are Zionists. Is making the argument that we need to stand behind Eric Adams because if he goes down for Turkey, we're next, right?
But wait a minute. But wait a minute. Why is it saying that Zionist Jews who support AIPAC or the ADL or B'nai B'rith are going to be criminalized? I don't understand.
Right.
What has that got to do with Eric Adams? What is he holding back?
Right. right? So why is that, right? So a couple of questions, right? So first question is, for decades, Zionist lobbyist organizations, right? Israel lobby organizations, and that includes the AIPAC, that includes ADL, Betar Grift. These are all part of the network. Have always argued that they do not need to register under FARA because they're not an Israeli org; they're an American org, right? And that all the money that they receive comes from Americans, and blah blah blah. So why worry, right? So first question. Second question is, what does that have to do with Eric Adams, right? If you're worried about it setting precedent, you should have been worried about it setting precedent when Bob Menendez got convicted, right? Or Henry Kuehler got indicted, or a slew of other people, because they're all related to the same thing, FARA in a foreign country, right? So why Eric Adams? Well, it's because Eric Adams receives a lot of money from the Israel lobby.
Of course.
Not only that, but Eric Adams has also been subpoenaed for that activity, right? And he's been subpoenaed for, in particular, related to trips that he took to Israel that were paid for by a Zionist organization, but the money came for, are you ready for this?
Mark Rowan.
Mark Rowan from Apollo Capital, billionaire, right? And so, in return for favors, right? And so he's gone on a couple of trips like this, and it's actually been reported and questioned at the time, like, hey, this doesn't look right, you know? So I started to stumble on a couple of the articles that actually pointed to these articles that were published about his trip. So I found those, I started looking, and I'm like, holy moly. This man, they paid, I think it was something like $35,000 or $39,000 for this guy to go on a trip to Israel. Like, that's a lot of money, and that means you're really flying posh, right? And so anyhow, so that's one piece of it, and there's others, right? So then you look a little bit deeper, and you realize that there was also another article about Eric Adams, and it had to do with the raid in Columbia University.
Oh yeah, this one that you showed back here. Sorry, I just had it. Oh, I went too far. Okay.
Yeah, no, you didn't go too far. Keep going. It's after this one.
Okay, it's after this. Okay.
It's after this, yeah.
There's that Ronn Torossian, and reminder of who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's that Boris, that's that Boris guy they keep putting out there.
From that organization that Ronn Torossian, Ron is the head of that organization.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And here's a Guardian article.
Yeah, about some of his, straw donations, which, by the way, the Israel lobby is very infamous for doing. And I'll explain this in a little bit. But if you keep going, it's right after this. So if you remember in the spring of 2024, when all of the pro-Palestine encampments were happening in, universities. Mm-hmm. So there was an article that came out, again, I think it was the New York Times that published it, but it was about this group chat, this WhatsApp group chat that was called Israel Current Events. Mm-hmm. It had over 100 members who were Zionist billionaires and wealthy people who were staunch pro-Israel advocates who were coordinating to shape the narrative of to shape a pro-Israel narrative on what was happening in Gaza. And so they started to turn their ire towards these protests that were happening, and in particular, Columbia University. And I was kind of curious as to why Columbia. Like, I know a lot of them lived in New York, but why Columbia, you know?
Right.
Well, it turned out is that Columbia started the encampment movement.
Yes.
It was Columbia who first did it. So their thought process was, if you take the mothership down, right? They kind of saw Columbia as the mothership, then all of the other encampments will go away too. But as long as Columbia stands, then the encampments will continue. So they start talking about getting, the NYPD to raid Columbia and to go after these students. But their challenge was that Columbia is a private university, and they, NYPD would have to get invited in. And so then they started talking about, meeting with Eric Adams, offering him things, see what he wants, to get him to, to cooperate and raid Columbia. And then they also talked about going to the board at Columbia and pressuring the board members and the donors to pressure the board members to allow the NYPD, to invite the NYPD to come and arrest it. So they had a meeting with Adams, and they invited him to have a meeting with them. They had the meeting. And 2 days later, after this meeting, Columbia got raided by the NYPD.
Right.
Now, and so what happened is that whatchamacallit, they get raided on, okay, so let me talk about the raid real quick. So they get raided, right? So the raid was interesting because what happens is that, some more articles, thankfully to The Guardian, and some other people as well, started reporting that when NYPD came onto campus, they did not know where to go, right? They don't know how to navigate it or who to arrest, because there was, there was only what they were targeting in that raid were the people who were in Hind Hall, and not everybody, right? Because they wanted to kind of keep it at a minimum. Well, there was a professor that was at Columbia, by name of Rebecca Weiner, who was also the head of
the task force,
NYPD Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau at the NYPD. She was credited by Adams as being the spy. He literally called her a spy, as being the spy on campus and spying on these students, gathering information about them, and then on the day of the raid, navigating and directing the NYPD as to where to go to raid and arrest students. Okay, so if you fast forward just a little bit in this screen, I go into her a little bit.
Rebecca, there we go. Oh, you got Rebecca right there.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can actually make it bigger.
Yeah, I'll blow that up again. Sure.
Yeah. So Rebecca is very interesting. Okay. So she is, like I said, she's, professor there. She's also, heads this counterterrorism bureau. And interestingly, the Counterterrorism Bureau has an office in Tel Aviv.
Yes.
She's on record saying that since October 7th, their office gets daily, I think daily or hourly, reports from their Tel Aviv office. And so this is, Columbia congratulating her, right, on getting the intel position. And then, she coordinates with them. And then here's the real interesting part. That bureau that she heads was reported in 2011, which they continue to do, that they have a program that's called the demographic unit. The demographic unit maps human terrain mapping, which you covered on one of your segments that I saw.
Yep.
Human terrain mapping is something that I reported on as well in regards to Tulsi Gabbard and what the DOD does, on foreign countries, right? And so they took this information and started to do this in New York on New Yorkers. Now, let me back up. Post 9/11, when this unit was created, it was created in conjunction and under the tutelage of the CIA. The CIA not only sent active CIA members who are on the CIA's payroll to help stand up this unit, but they continued to send active CIA members to train people on how to find informants, how to, look for, how to blend in and basically spy on communities and get intel and gather intel on them and all this kind of stuff. And then also how to do the human terrain mapping. And so all of this is done on particularly Muslim communities.
Yep.
And a lot of people were added to lists, right? And so that behavior in the gray zone reporting said that they used that same methodology on Colombia. They went into Colombia and they did human terrain mapping of these students on the Columbia campus and ID'd and created lists of who's who and who needs to get arrested and who needs to do this and who needs to do that. And it's all based on bullshit, because in this clip that you're showing, she's in a hearing explaining why did NYPD arrest these students? What crime did they commit? She explains that crime wasn't committed. They were arrested because they showed signs of what does she call it? Rhetoric that aligned with terrorist organizations. That wearing headbands that align with a terrorist organization is indicative of you potentially committing a crime. That in speech, right? So things like river to the sea, things like that, or terrorist rhetoric, and therefore they were arrested for that. So speech and clothing is what they arrested them for.
Yep.
Now, mind you, majority of them, the arrests end up becoming bogus because, it just doesn't hold muster. But that's where they were going with this. And when you look at where they mapped this from, and Gray Zone, again, does a great job of showing this, that, when they applied the human terrain mapping methodology to Columbia University, they actually adopted, and it appeared that they were adopting and mirroring a similar program that was used in the West Bank to map out people who live there.
Right.
And so you see this behavior of this,
there you go.
where
Map
they're
the city's
getting
human terrain.
And now apply it to students. And now that you've mapped the terrain and they're not committing crimes, but you arrest them anyway because a bunch of billionaire donors told Eric Adams to do it. A bunch of them donated to him, and then promised, a bunch of other things to him in terms of sending him, private detectives to help NYPD to identify people that they could arrest and all this other BS.
And it's certainly a privacy violation of every student on campus, at minimum.
Exactly. And so then they go in, raid, arrest. The arrests don't hold, water. And the justification is pre-crime. Well, if you look at where they repeat this bullshit about pre-crime, is a lot of these, Israel organizations that are selling this notion and idea to law enforcement, DHS, FBI, local law enforcement, of using AI tools to ID people who are in protests and keeping them on databases, because you never know, right? That they could show back up and then that it's them. So it's this, complete witch hunt.
Surveillance
and
state.
Complete criminal surveillance, absolute surveillance state, and simply to crush, protesters that are asking, their universities or their government to stop supporting genocide.
And you're talking about private businesses, who are involved in this chat, in this WhatsApp chat or whatever, this group thread, right? You're talking about private businesses, private educational institutions, and public policing. That's literally the definition of fascism. That's like, public-private partnership type of stuff, where you've got the merge of the corporation and the state effectively controlling a narrative that it's very dangerous.
It is. And what they've done is you take what we just discussed, and how, it's all of these pieces involved, right? So you've got these, literally a list of who's who billionaires of Wall Street, of tech companies, of you name it, in this group chat, who have helped Adams orchestrate this whole thing. You've got a Israel-linked, bureau chief who is constantly getting, updates from Israel, whose, department has mapped the entire program, around an Israeli program, who, going after students. Now, where does this all lead back to why the panic on Eric Adams and the FARA violations and the subpoenas and investigations going forward? Well, if you look at that, if these subpoenas continued, for one, it would uncover a lot of this, these kickbacks that Adams has enjoyed from the pro-Israel lobby, right? But it also opens up a lot of other things that he has done as favors, right? Namely this group chat, because there are members of this group chat who donated to Adams and are documented in the group chat with screenshots stating that they gave Adams donations as part of this conversation to go raid Colombia. So this again goes
literally
back
pay for play.
Pay for play, right? And so you've got a lot of powerful people who cannot afford to have Eric Adams get convicted. So the narrative that we see, and I think that, in this case, I'm not sure, I haven't seen anything that indicates to me that Trump himself is aware of any of this, but a lot of it seems to indicate that whoever sold him this idea to, pardon this guy in exchange for him helping with going after the illegal immigrants, it's probably the carrot that they dangled, to get him to come on board. But you have to look at the guy who actually pitched these ideas, who actually worked this, and the guy responsible for this catastrophe that happened at the DOJ, which is Emil Bove.
Yep.
Emil Bove used to be an attorney in the Southern District of New York, right? And worked with Rebecca Weiner. They were basically the federal and state, counterparts on counterterrorism, intelligence gathering, going after, quote unquote, bad guys together. And they work together. They're on podcasts together. They've written stuff together. And so they work together very closely. A lot of the, people that he went in there and basically, I don't know how close you followed this story, but the 7 or now 8 attorneys that resigned rather than to sign off on dismissing the case against Adams came out one after another stating that they would not sign off on this because this is blatant interference and political and a quid pro quo essentially of a case that is very solid. This case would have been massive had it gone to court. And what they do is they paint these people as, initially they try to paint these people as a bunch of like Biden holdover, leftists, whatever, right? Well, it turns out that the lead prosecutor is actually a Trump appointee and is very much, conservative and not at all in that mold. Right. And so she is the one who came out very hardcore saying, no, this is, I don't agree with this. Right. And so they went down the chain one by one and as people resigned and they just kept continuing until finally the person that ended up signing it, which they push as a narrative that says, these people were just abusing their power, blah, blah. And then finally, look, somebody did sign in, da, da, da. But the guy actually came out with a statement saying that the reason he signed it is that he wanted to save more of his colleagues from quitting because he felt that it would be, a big loss to the Department of Justice to have all these like attorneys quit. And so the reason for it was not at all because, the person signed because they thought that they agreed with it. They did it to save their colleagues. Also, the argument they keep pushing forward is that the case was meritless and was a witch hunt and overuse of government power, blah, blah, blah. That's not at all what Emil Bove stated was the reason. The reason he stated was that, this was too close to the election, and that DOJ has a standing policy not to, go after people. Well, that doesn't hold water because the guy was indicted in September of 2024. Their election isn't until October of 2025. So that's a whole year ahead, right? Second was, that it would preclude him from coordinating on classified information to include going after illegals. Well, again, that is the quid pro quo right there, right? And what they're, is the trade-off. Like, hey, we'll drop the charges, you help us, find the illegals. But it does not mean that the case did not have standing or merit. And it does not mean that that's why you dismissed it, because you clearly have stated that's not why you dismissed it. It actually had merit, and 8 people quit because you did that. So when I finally finish this article, I hope to, lay all of that out very clearly that, I believe and that there's a lot of evidence that shows that, there was a lot of people who would benefit that were, on the pro-Israel side that would benefit from Eric Adams, indictment and subpoenas getting dropped altogether because it touched way too close to home for them.
Yeah, they had to make that case disappear for a lot of different reasons, and they have Trump in there. The Adelsons and a lot of the Zionist lobby has Trump in their pocket, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be Trump. It's just somebody connected to Trump makes a phone call to a lawyer that's already connected and apparently worked on a case on a case for him. So it wouldn't be that hard for him to ask them to do a favor, and now all of a sudden you're seeing that the attorney general, or who's the guy that ordered the attorneys to drop the case?
The deputy attorney general,
Emil Bove.
Acting, acting deputy attorney general. And the funny part about Emil Bove, if you go into the clip right before this one, is it's so funny because Trump appointed him, and actually, if you keep going, appointed him and his business partner, deputy attorney general and assistant deputy attorney general. So Bove is actually the assistant deputy attorney general. His business partner, Blanche, who both of them worked in Blanche Law, is the deputy attorney general. But the deputy attorney general position has to get confirmed, which is why Bove's is in there temporarily, because his business partner hasn't been confirmed yet. So,
and you can put somebody in temporarily without confirming them as an interim.
Exactly.
And you can actually have them there the entire 4 years as an interim and never have them Senate confirmed, by the way. They played that game before.
Yep. And these two guys worked at different law firms, very big law firms. And when Trump had his, the New York case, the one with the hush money, whatever her name was, Stormy Daniels hush money case. Yeah, they both left their law firms when Trump hired them to represent him, and they created Blanche Law. So then they worked under Blanche Law, and then when Trump got elected, they got appointed deputy attorney general and assistant deputy attorney general. So the nepotism, just to sort of the kickbacks run. Yeah. I mean, of course, you can't just point that to Trump. They all do it. Every administration does it. But it's just, in this case, Bove, his footprint ties directly to New York politics, New York counterterrorism, Israel, all of those players that play there. And then just to take it a piece, because I did skip past this, but Ron Torossian, the way he's involved with Eric Adams, as I mentioned before, he helped him get elected in the last election, but was also really involved with him in a lot of ways. Well, interestingly, when the FBI was raiding different people's homes that were connected to Eric Adams, they were looking specifically for, in one of the cases, they were specifically looking for any connections of Ron Torossian to Eric Adams and influencing him to, to do favors for Turkey in return for kickbacks. Well, why would Ronn Torossian, who's a Zionist, whose whole thing is about Israel, be involved in a Turkey thing? Because Ronn Torossian is also a registered agent of Turkey.
For Turkey. That's right. He's a lobbyist for Turkey.
Yeah, he's an actual registered agent under FARA, under Turkey. And so, that is another set of connections that we're linking to Adams. So when I can go on forever pointing at all of the different connections that were there. Eric Schmidt, the guy the Google guy, Eric Schmidt, who was also in that group chat, was also in Ronn Torossian's entourage, if you will, with Eric Adams going to parties. Like I said, this guy loves taking pictures. So there's millions of pictures of them out there.
It's like Rabbi Shmuley, it reminds me of. He loves just taking his picture with every politician.
Yes. And putting it out there and letting everybody know, hey, I'm so connected. And then basically playing off of that to get more business and more credibility for themselves. So
all right. Well,
unbelievable story.
Well, again, you're doing a tremendous amount of research here and putting out. And again, this is just one part of the story that you have been uncovering. So for everybody, we didn't even get into Richie Torres and how Torossian also has been involved in fundraising for Richie Torres and helped Richie Torres raise over $1 million for the 2024 cycle. Again, I encourage everybody to follow you on Twitter, X, as well as now it looks like you're starting to dip back into Substack a little bit, maybe, hopefully, and publish there a little bit more. But yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
But by all means,
I have to learn how to use it first.
Well, I can help teach that, but by all means, everyone go follow at GenXGirl1994 on Twitter, X. I can't stand calling it X because Elon likes that. But
I know.
But thank you again for joining us today. We'll be back. We'll do this again. Again, this has been a fun series. I learn a lot. People seem to really like our conversations, and they're learning a ton from your research. And I thank you for doing it because, there's no way to pay you. You're not getting paid by anybody to do it. It's just because you're angry about the way that you see things running that I see.
Yeah.
You don't put up a GoFundMe link. There's no Cash App or PayPal. You're not looking to solicit any kind of funding to do this. It's just to expose the facts that are out there. And that's the way that we live, and we love that. Now, we do ask for funding. So if you are able to and of means, those are the incredible people that do support our channel. Okay, that's our wall of fame. We do not get, we're demonetized on YouTube. So we ask you to, if you want to support our network and help us fund all the things that we do, Cash App, $ IndieNews Network, ko-fi.com/IndieNews Network, paypal.me/IndieNews Network, or you can subscribe at our newsletter at INNnewsletter.com, and you can do that on an annual or on a monthly basis. And again, GenXGirl, thank you so much. We'll be back soon. I don't know exactly when. Maybe next month. We'll try to make this a monthly thing if possible. And if you're available, that's awesome. I'll let you have the last word, and then I'll say goodbye.
Oh, well, just thanks for listening, and hope people find it useful.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Have a great day, and we will see you soon. Have a great one. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. Love you, everyone.
Can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. No, why play civil when all these dead won't make you listen? What's more American than slaying your oppressors? What's more American than liberty or death first? God, I thought we were founded on abolishing the tyranny of those who would starve a village all to live empirically. And I regret that I have only one life to give for my cause now.